Thank you so much to Dr. Xiao for being here. What an inspiring and insightful conversation. I so appreciate all of the truly actionable guidance that was in our conversation because it can feel really, really overwhelming when we are thinking about these topics and how they affect our youth. We're thinking about substance use, addiction to social media, the risks around being online, as well as when we think about things such as suicidal thoughts and ideation and depression, anxieties amongst our young people. We can't close our eyes to these issues. We can learn how to be there for the young people in our lives, help them set boundaries, and create a world where social media can be used for betterment and that we can try to avoid its pitfall. Please let me know your thoughts about the show and any questions you may have. And if you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, thoughts of self-harm, or other mental health issues, we highly encourage that you seek help. We're so glad you're here. You deserve to be safe and live a fulfilling and happy life. And sometimes we all need support to get there. Thank you so much for being here, storytellers. As always, it's an honor to be able to spend this time with you and be a part of your life. Please make sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on our upcoming guest episodes like we had today with inspiring people, as well as our mindset mastery, neuroscience themed short talks. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I am passionate about using storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. Today, I am so excited to have researcher Dr. Yunyu Xiao. Dr. Xiao is an assistant professor in health informatics at Weill Cornell Medicine, New York Presbyterian, in the Department of Population Health Sciences and the Department of Psychiatry. Thank you so much, Dr. Xiao, for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I was very intrigued by listening to other interviews that you've done on the discussion of social pressures on young adults and children, the potential consequences of those, and how we can be supportive adults in their lives to help them navigate these challenges. I know you've done research on mental health and stigma, addiction, and I think it could be really helpful to share this with our audiences. A lot of people who are listening are parents who are navigating these waters with their young children, teenagers, and college-age children, and they could really use some support. So I'd love to start off our conversation by sharing the why behind what you do, sharing with the audience more about you and your journey. What inspired you to pursue a career in research and focus on health informatics and mental health?
Yes, I'd love to share with that. So I think my very big interest in mental health really started since my high school. Because I was having a very good friend, and as Asian heritage friend, like kids that we all strive for like academic excellence. But my good friend has been actually really experiencing a lot of like bullying from the classmates, and I have impersonally like witnessed that she actually have some of the self-harm behaviors. Have been diagnosed with bulimia, and then later on, I think there's just one day that she totally disappeared from my world. And so I have been really puzzling, and as a very young kid in China, right? Like where I was growing up, I didn't actually have the awareness, and I was not equipped with any type of this mental health like support knowledge to be the gatekeeper, to be the emotional support, or link her to some of these professional resources. So since I started my undergraduate, it was in political science. But I have been very interested in like mental health laws, and I was witness and finding that actually in many other. So I did my undergraduate in Hong Kong, and I was exposed to many other organizations that will be able to provide either free or school-based like mental health resources for children, for adolescents, for students. And I find that it's very good. So I started to get very interested in terms of like mental health and psychiatry as a domain. However, I find that, in fact, we all know that if we go to see a private psychiatry, that is very expensive. But I find with the statistics, the majority of the people who died by like suicide, they are sometimes like lack of the enough and needed resources. So we
Mm.
need to address mental health in a holistic way. So starting from then, I started to use my knowledge in terms of social science, in terms of policies, and then with the another type of trainings that I have in terms of all the data science, informatics, statistics. I started to know how to pull them all together. So it's a marriage between my social science background and the data science knowledge, and also my personal experiences in terms of like driving me for the passion of addressing psychiatry, specifically through informatics.
Mm. That's a beautiful way to recollect it. And honestly, I think it so resonates with so many of us because we aren't one thing and we didn't go into the role we're in now because of one reason. It's this combination of influences. And I love how you have pivoted in your professional life and you've also incorporated the passion from your personal life. That's really amazing. Now, one of the things when we're talking about young people and their mental health that's a big concern for many parents and families and individuals is the role of substances in the lives of the younger members of our community. That's a problem all across the United States and certainly has a disproportionate effect often on some of our rural communities as well. What
Yeah.
substances are you seeing as causing the most disruption in young people's lives today?
Yeah, so from our research, we started to understand, like from a holistic way, that before, I think the most, like many people mention about previous like mental disorders, family histories, that has been studied and it's true. But more recently, what we also find is about the attachment in terms of social media and then awareness and then increasing rates of actually feeling loneliness as well. And for right now, because of the dynamics of like exposure to different kinds of news, like the absorptions of like news, and also the burdens in terms of like facing their future, that there are financial burdens, and those kind of social factors starting to picking up in terms of like the exposures to the social determinants of the youth. And from my earlier research, I also studied a lot about social networks. And then across the growth of like adolescents, there are different type of the social networks. Like in the beginning, it is more about like interactions with parents, and then later on with more friends, with teachers, and then with spouse. So relationship really matters for like mental health. So one of the things that we find is that the relationship in the earlier stage for parental closeness, especially with the mothers, are actually a key preventative and protective factors for suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. When the adolescents growing up. So incorporating and educating how parents can be a big role in terms of protecting their adolescents are very important.
You know, we don't necessarily think about the connection, what we might call the low hanging fruit, right? We're thinking about all of these external things we can do to safeguard our children, but just focusing on meeting them where they are and connecting with them as parents, that's really protective. I really appreciate you sharing that because we can all often get lost. Kind of makes me think of when you talked about social media and the news and how overwhelming all that information is. It's easy for us to get sucked into that chaotic vortex and feel like, what can I do? What can I do that's bigger than this external chaos that we're facing? Well, you have power that they don't, which is that really meaningful connection with the people you love.
Yes, exactly. Especially earlier in our conversation, you also mentioned just about like substances. Like we
Mm-hmm.
know that fentanyl is actually increasingly using among the adolescents as well. And then there's a pandemic about like opioid pandemic, especially for younger people, the fentanyl access like is very prevalent right now. And then that is actually just one type of this addiction, right? But then from our research, we also find other type of addiction. For example, the social media is also like it's not just about the time that children and adolescents spend with different digital platforms. But from our research, we find that it is this addictive, like addictive use of this social media. And that is something that we also find that the key factors also is like the cyberbullying, that the content that adolescents consumed are also very important. And in fact, that we also find that parental monitoring, like how parent can guide and then support a healthier way of interacting with different social media platforms, is very important because contrary to many of these like regulations about just stop using the phones, what's most useful right now is that in fact we cannot really actually ban the phone use, and then if we just cannot stop the trend, what about the split side of it is to guide us to how to really use it properly.
Yes, absolutely. And you spoke about something that I want to highlight, which is
Hmm.
the varying types of social media content. And I've
Yeah.
read and understood that, different even platforms have a different way of essentially packaging potentially the same material in ways that are more dopaminergic stimulated. They give you a bigger dopamine boost when you go through some platforms compared to others. And so certain age groups are seeking them out and becoming more and more addicted and spending more and more time and then feeling quite numb and then seeking other substances. One, do you have any insights in the varying platforms? And two, is there a connection between that numb feeling and then seeking other substances like drugs and alcohol amongst young people to try to get back what they feel they've lost, because they're in this setup for their nervous system where they're constantly needing that input and feeling so numb.
Yeah, we haven't really studied like the correlations between the different kinds of like addictions or attachment
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
like social media and then the other substances. I think that's just a very good question to ask as well. My assumption is that they might be highly correlated, but we don't yet know which causes which.
Hmm.
But we know what we know is that um people and children tend to use multiple platforms at the same time. And for children who are, like I mentioned, that there are different types and different modules of using, like we can say like video games is one of the screen time. And then especially for multiple player video games, then for people who are having high use of video game because they are actually designed actually to be addicted, and it's also very associated for using social media such as like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And more recently, I think there are other platforms emerge as well. And at the same time, this group of children are also likely to use like mobile phones. So in the mobile phone, there are also other type of the apps that the children are using. So the trend is like if one addiction type is high, and then it's also very high for the other types as well. But it's also it will be important to understand the different like correlations across the social media and other like substances or drug uses as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be interesting to look at that correlation, because if you're setting up a pattern of behavior, we know that once we're in a certain behavioral pattern for dopamine seeking, et cetera, that pattern is likely to repeat itself until you break that pattern, and that can be difficult, especially for setting those patterns really young. Now, to focus on what we can do, because like you said, it's really challenging or impossible to completely remove this from young people's lives.
Yeah.
Since we know that this is addictive, we know that it's rewiring our brain chemistry and it's going to have downstream side effects. We may not know what they all are yet, but we know that they're coming. What can we do? We've heard about, changing our screens to grayscale and limiting
Yeah.
times. What are the things that parents and caregivers and individuals who are seeing, I think I have a relationship with my device and these substances that are coming through my own brain, right? I'm getting a chemical substance from the relationship I have with my phone. What are things that we can do to mitigate that?
Yeah, and I think there is no one size fits all. And then I
Mm.
think this is like youth mental health and suicide behaviors is very, very complex. So what I can tell and share with is from our own research. I think that we need to have different stakeholders to actually build a holistic like environment that it is very protective. For example, like one of the gatekeepers is the clinicians and also the children, the school-based like psychiatrists or psychologists. And then specifically for assessing like the exposures to cyberbullying and assessing the family relationships, how your parents really interact with you. And in fact, one of the like research is also like having family meals. Like this is very practical. Having family meals is also important to have in nourish a good family relationship, and that is actually helpful for parents to foster like an open communications and a healthier screen habits, healthier engagement with other lifestyles as well. And also, I think for the teachers as well, it's also important to because there is correlation between offline bullying and online bullying. Like if we cannot really monitor the cyberbullying online, then people who are like the victims of like in the class the who are being bullied is also like a high risk group that we want to study. And in the longer run, I think also to include those stakeholders from the industries that who are designing this compulsive like digital media behavior games. I think they also need to be aware and engage in this discussion.
Absolutely. I'm not aware currently, with your research, you may be more aware than me at this point. Are there regulations in the works to try to hold them responsible? I mean, we know things like, the tobacco industry, alcohol industry. Regulations are often very slow to be put in place compared to the actual substances or the things that's causing the response in people and then leading to these negative effects. So is there anything in the works now that you're aware of that will hopefully institute some rules and regulations to keep people safe and set them on the right path for their relationship in the digital world?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I can see that, for example, like Instagram, it's also on Facebook as well. I think it has like a parent mode that you can also monitoring, like the account and also, age is important. So, like to regulate like to what age that which content, can be consumed, is also one of the ongoing, regulations. And one more thing is also about like suicide related content that we know that exposures to online content about suicide behaviors. There is a study like previously there is a like a TV show called 30 Reasons and Why. And then they talked about like how Annabelle like tried to attempt suicide, and that is quite misleading information. And those
Mm.
information are more regulated right now in terms of like who this content can be shown. So I think by working more and especially as researchers to understand like what are the more harmful content are, and then to work with the industries to ban this from appearing from the adolescents like social media account is very important. And I think there are we start to have some conversations, but we need more.
Absolutely. And there are so many dangers out there. I think about my own children and the games that they want to play. You hear about things like Roblox and how even beyond bullying, how you have people of varying age groups with varying interests in life and expectations then going in a predatory sense and engaging with these young children in a game like Roblox, and then that leading to predatory behavior and assault of these young people who are just trying to play a game. So having those regulations and having those safeguards in place are so important to keep our children safe in this digital world, and then understanding that there's a bleed between the digital and the real world. And frankly, more and more, it feels like the digital world is becoming our real lived experience, and the real world is less of what we are experiencing in our days.
Yes, I think so. And but I think there's a hope. Like there are a lot of like research, and I think right now we need to do more advocacy as well, and especially because the during the pandemic we have studies about misinformation, and initially people talk about misinformation is to talk about how to reduce it, right? This is one approach, but the other approach, what we find is that in order for us to tackle misinformation, actually it's also good to like to work on more good information. Is that with the misinformation online, we can also post more positive, post more correct, post more trustful and rigorous scientific evidence-based information. And I think why I'm very interested in also do more advocacy, engaging with like communicating through research to more like social media, podcasts. It's about like the more we talk, the more awareness we have. And as a researcher, I think the key is to actually really generate the evidence and the results that will be useful and practical.
That is so true. I believe the statistic or the rate is it takes 100 times more energy to disprove something than to
Yeah.
prove it. So that is such an important point that we can focus our efforts if we want to basically go against this tide of misinformation that we all know is out there on social media and on the internet. We can't counter it by quashing, play whack-a-mole with all of the disinformation. We just have to focus on the right information and then safeguarding our more our populations that are at higher risk if they're exposed to this information. How do we safeguard them from it? Yes, but not necessarily focusing on the disproving, focusing on making quality places for people to go and get the right information, safe places for our children to learn and connect with one another, because we know they're going to want to connect. We can't prevent that, and we don't really want to. We want them to have a safe digital place to be in.
Yeah, because there is also like cross-sectional, but so it's not causal, like evidence suggesting that not every type of use of social media is harmful. Because social media or engagement with digital platform can be also useful. For example, if you are good at using and engaging with connecting with people online, this is also one way actually to get social connections, right? And that is, we also know that good social relationships is beneficial. And sometimes like a quick check-in with your friends with the social media is text messages. It's also a way for us to maintain our relationship. So I think from my point of view, just focusing on the time you spend on screen is really not very useful for intervention. But the addiction part that we find, it is the key to tackle. And then for us to protect and reduce the harmful side, we need to have better understanding of how to regulate and how to monitor for parents, for friends, and for ourselves.
This is such useful information, and I love your measured approach because social media is not going away, the internet's not going away. There are benefits to it, but we need to be measured and thoughtful about how we're using it, and also be aware that so many things are created to trigger our nervous systems in ways that keep us coming back for more. That's from something we eat, like sugars, to the things that we digest online and on our social media. So, really important to be just mindful and aware of that, especially if we are at a stage with our children where we can help impart them with positive information, as well as the regulations within our home, not to control them, but to really set them on a path that is healthy for them and showing them. Because I think that some parents really struggle with not wanting to alienate themselves from their kids. They know how the social media world and the social world, especially for teenagers, is so
Mhm.
important to young people. So they don't, when they're said, oh, all my friends have an iPhone, all my friends are on this social media platform or that platform, they're all allowed to do this, they all play this game. How could you not? You're ruining my life. Understanding that we should be reasonable, but at the end of the day, we are there to help our children with learning self-regulation, with learning how to not only do what they want to do, but do what's healthy, and be there to help them set those boundaries and learn those good habits.
Yeah, and there are also two things that I can share as well. One is that a quick way is to delay the use of phone. And 13 years old is actually one of these like age threshold that many of these like people would recommend that if you delay the phone use until like 13 years old, that it's probably better. Like for example, the puberty development, the brain development is probably more mature in order to handle it. And the second point I can also suggest is also like parents are also role models. Like if your children are constantly seeing that you are playing your phone, you are engaged in chatting with friends, and that is also like an exposure, right? So
Mm.
parents is also a good role model for their children, like, and in fact that if we already and if parents already have much more engagement with children, like you spend time reading the stories, you spend time going out, and probably they won't even have a lot of time to spend on their own social media, or they don't have the willingness because they already get this dopamine and fulfillment from their offline world.
Yes, exactly. That's the approach that we do in our home. And for me, because I do with my work, I do have my phone near me. And for communication purposes, one of the ways that I try to navigate if I'm being contacted or my phone dings is one, if I know it's a ding I don't need to attend to, I ignore it, which I hope is sending the message that you don't have, your phone doesn't rule you. Your phone is a tool for you, right? Like I don't respond to my phone if I don't need to. I'm talking to you and there's a ding in the other room. I don't run and get my phone, right? I can
Yeah, yeah,
regulate myself. And another thing I do is if it is a ding that I know it's a text message, I'm waiting to hear from grandma because maybe something's going on, I'll say, hey, I think that's grandma. Let me go check on that. So they understand the why behind what I'm doing. So I try to
yeah.
make really focus on it's a tool, not a toy. And I always say that too. If my youngest asks for it to watch a video, I say, no, sorry, that's a tool. It's not a toy. It's not for watching videos. So I've been really protective over what my phone is to my kids. And they really aren't asking for a phone and they're not asking for time on the computer, and it's really just to type something up. My daughter's a storyteller, she's an author, so if she's
Oh,
asking to use
great.
the computer, it's to do math homework or it's to actually physically type something out. So I think, for me, I really live by holding those boundaries as to what we use specific devices for and really focusing on them being tools and not toys. And that way, if we play video games, it's just on a video game device. And when we're done with that, it goes away. It's not with us all the time, tempting us because they don't have the regulatory abilities that we have to
Yeah.
say, I only game at a certain time and then I'm done. If the phone is there and they play games on it, it's going to be tempting all the time.
Yeah, and it's very good to set boundary. It's very good to set rules, and then it's very good to know what's the purpose of doing what? Because the key thing about like using social media that is harmful is that you are mindlessly using it, like by just scrolling up like Instagram, the feeds. And then that is the way that it is created to be addicted. But if you know and you want and you find that actually engaging with some of the social media is useful, how about like after dinner, I block like 30 minutes or 10 minutes for me to just constantly focusing on on checking in who is doing what's the updates from my friends who give a birth, and then that's it. And then set the boundary so you can separate your online work with your offline work.
Mm. And I wonder if also scheduling a time when you journal about what you learned or, you talk to someone, engage with someone about what you learned is a way to then solidify the information and the process and make it a learning rather than just I'm flipping time, I'm getting my dopamine hits and then I'm done, right? Making it a
Yeah.
different kind of process.
Yeah, yeah, and making it like social, and then you can even have like journal, like we have like journal club, and you can also have like another type of journal club, but then to share what I learned, and this is also a way to engage with friends. So have some objective, and what do you want to spend your time?
I love these ideas. And I think it's really important when we talk about a topic like this it makes a lot of people feel nervous and anxious that we talk about ways that we can take back control and agency over it and use it as a tool and use it in a healthy way and not get lost in our fears over it. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
Dr. Show you sharing those tips for people because I think it will really leave them feeling that, okay, I have some things that I can work on with my child that we can institute in our home to help them use this as a tool. Now, if you are worried about your child having addictive behaviors, whether it's a substance or it's through social media, and you're worried about their health, what do you recommend that families do to help them get the help they need?
Yeah, I think it's very important to seek for professional help and then to seek like a child psychiatrist and a psychologist first and then to talk to them. And one thing that we also have access to is like online therapies and then like those platforms that would offer like the first discussion about your behaviors and it's online. And there are more and more uses of like telepsychiatries recently, and then to start from there. And I think always getting into professional help, and then most of the time that what depending on what kind of like like mood disorders or kind of like different symptoms, I think there are different like treatment for each of these type of the disorders that we want to tackle. So I think seeking professional help and then being more aware of like the changes of like lifestyles, changes of like their interests is very important.
Absolutely. And I hope that our conversation today and the work you're doing is helping to break down some of that stigma so we can move away from stigma around mental health and our needs regarding our mental health. But when we discuss mental health, it's really important to acknowledge that the stigma is there, patients and families face it, and that can influence their access to care. What does your research tell you about how this affects the rates of seeking support and health from the healthcare sector for people who are coping with a variety of mental health care issues, such as addiction, depression, or suffering from having suicidal thoughts or ideation?
Yeah, so some of them are my research, some of them are from the literatures, and it constantly share that self-stigmatizing or even and also social stigma related to mental health is a key is a barrier of seeking help. And more recently, we are very interested in actually stigma from the clinicians that the doubt in terms of like not like a quote about like what the patients are saying is probably kind of like encourage people to seek help. So we are tackling in terms of like what would be a better language, better conversations, and in order for the patients to get engaged in the treatment as well. So uh, and then at the same time that social media also and advocating more stigma, destigmatizations campaign. I think that's a good way. And from our research, we find also that if you find actually your children or your loved ones or somebody who is close to you have suicidal thoughts or behaviors, it's very important to ask specifically about, for example, have you seriously thought about killing yourself? Because open that conversation and building the connectedness and is very important. And in the end, one thing I can share is that seeking help is not showing your weakness, but it's your strength to seek help.
Yes, I appreciate you mentioning meeting people where they are. So, on social media, where we know that young people are, making sure that we're asking curious questions and that we are not questioning the answers, but just showing up as active listeners, and that we are
Yeah,
asking the difficult questions, because research shows that you won't make someone commit suicide by asking them that question. And I think sometimes some of the reason we avoid the question is we're almost afraid that we are possibly going to push someone over the edge. But really, what we're doing when we ask that question, we're creating a bridge between us and this person, helping them feel seen and opening a conversation that may very well save their life.
exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Show. I appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge. Is there a way that listeners can learn more about you and the important research that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very active in Google Scholar, so that's the main areas that I publish. So, I'm happy to share many the links that I have, and also we're building a website about our lab. It is called Explore Lab. And the reason is that I think this is an exploring about how you engage research, informatics, social science, into addressing psychiatrists this domain. And I think from our approach, it's very important to engage social determinants of health, engaging your social networks. So stay tuned, and I would be happy to share the links, and people can check all our news, check our research output, and check our projects there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Show. This has been so impactful, and you have so much incredible insights to share. I encourage everyone to go to the show notes and find those links that will be there for you. And I, again, appreciate your time. This has been wonderful. And thank you, storytellers, for being here. I hope you learned something and that you can take it into your life and make actionable changes to keep you and your loved ones safe. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.